Hey everyone, Amanda here. Welcome back to my channel. If it is your first time here, make sure you jump down and hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. And if you find this video at all helpful, give it a thumbs up while you're down there. Today we are going to be testing out the Kelly Creates pen collection from American Crafts, the ones that you can find at Michael's. It took my Michael's forever to get these in stock, but I was super excited when they did and figured that would be the best time to go ahead and do a pen test. So I got these earlier this week and I have been dying to get this pen test in. So without any further ado, I am going to jump right into the test itself and give you all the information that I have on these. And I will go ahead and I'll let you know that instead of just doing the pen test in one notebook, I did it in 4. So you will see how the pens react on the Scribbles That Matter paper, on Leuchtturm paper, on Rhodia paper, and then on the Recollections paper, the $5 journals from Michael's also. So I wanted to keep everyone in mind when I was doing this pen test and all different paper types in mind so that it would be as useful to as many people as possible. So we're going to jump right in and I'm going to go through the pen sets one by one. Okay, so the first set of pens that I am going to look at is going to be the metallic jewel brush pen set. It is a set of 8. The retail on it is $17.99 at Michael's. And from the outside of the box, the pens look really nice as far as colors are concerned. You're going to find what you would generally find in like a metallic pack. You're going to have your silver, your gold and bronze, a pink, a purple, a couple of green shades, and a blue. So let's sort of go over the brush tip and what it's sort of comparable to. This is going to be your brush tip on it. And I found that these brush tips had a lot of give, which is going to give you a nice variation in your line widths. So you can get really chunky on your downstrokes and still come up with a little bit of practice and control into a really thin upstroke, especially if you're doing calligraphy. So that's really nice. I really like this shimmer. The colors are just yummy. I really like the amount of pigment in each of these, and the colors are extremely saturated. So once you start laying down the ink, it's not going to vary throughout the line. It's a nice consistent amount of ink, which is great. Now, because these are metallic, they sort of have a silver shimmer that sits on top of the paper, and this is my Scribbles That Matter collections journal that I did my initial pen test in. And so what I will say about these being the metallics is I did notice a little rub off of that top silver layer onto this next page. So there's a little bit of transfer from this kind of pen. I don't know how much I would actually use these metallics in my journal, but that is something to note. I did notice that it does come off, so if it does bother you, you could just run over it with an eraser, and for the most part it will come right up. So I mean, it's not something that's going to transfer permanently onto the page with your eraser. So that doesn't bother me too much at all. I'm going to pull this closer up to the camera and see if you can catch some of the shimmer. It has a nice amount of shimmer to it, so I really like those. Those were super saturated and very juicy pens. All of the pens in this collection were very juicy, and I really like that. Okay, so this is going to be the test for it. And turning the page over on the Scribbles That Matter, there is hardly any ghosting, which I didn't expect there to really be, but there's hardly any ghosting. There's definitely no bleed through on any of these pens. So that was really nice. Okay. I did the same test in each one. So this is going to be the Leuchtturm paper. You're going to get a little bit more noticeable ghosting on this paper. Still no bleed through though. So there they are side by side. You can see where this shows through just a little bit more than this does. The Rhodia paper for me. But there's that last one. I did notice that because the pens are so wet, that this did wrinkle the page a little bit, but not too terribly bad. And if you're someone who watercolors anyway, you may not even notice that. And this is a slightly thinner paper than would be found in the other two journals that I've already shown you. So, I mean, it's not anything really noticeable after it dries, but I did notice some wrinkling of the paper when the inks were still wet. But again, the paper held up really well. There is hardly any ghosting on that, and definitely no bleed through. And then we have the $5 Recollections journal from Michaels, which is a surprisingly decent journal. I don't mind this journal too much. The paper quality is not quite the same as the other hardbound journals, but it's not bad. So I like using these too for smaller things. But here we have the test on this side. I'm seeing a little bit, it's mostly the blue, I think, that transfers over. I don't see a lot of transfer from anything else, but there are a couple of spots here from the blue. The paper stands up really nicely as well. I mean, you're not going to get any buckling in the paper from it. I sort of ran my lefty hand through the green here, so don't mind that too much. That was just me running my hand across it while it was still wet. These do take a little bit of time to dry, so do keep that in mind. But on the back, there is some ghosting, just touches of bleed through on these pens here and there. This is the red, and I really bear down apparently right in the first T over here, and just a couple of little specks is what bled through. So if you don't have such a heavy hand, there's some in the gold, just little spots bled through, but otherwise it held up really well. But if you have a heavy hand, just be a little conscious of the fact that they will bleed through on this type of paper. But I was really surprised with how well this held up to such a wet pen. All in all, I mean, I really love this set. The colors are really nice. You can get, like I said, a lot of line variation with these. The pens are super flexible, but still have enough firmness for you to sort of be able to control your lines with it. Let me see if I can. Here on the Rhodia paper, I'm just going to write out test. And this video would have taken forever if I time-lapsed the entire pen test in. So that's why I did the pen test beforehand. But like you can see, it is a really wet pen. And so it is going to take a minute for all of that ink to really sink into the paper. It's still wet in spots. So just like I said, these are extremely juicy pens. So you're going to want to make sure that you plan for that. The T is still wet here, and there's still a wet spot up here in this T. But otherwise, okay, this is finally dry. But with a minimal amount of pressure, that's about the thinnest line that I can get on these. And then you can get a really chunky downstroke. So, I mean, the amount of variation in the line widths that you're going to be able to get is really nice. So, I love the flexibility on this nib. Okay, so the next set of pens is going to be the multicolor small brush pens, and that is a 10 pack, and it's got a nice variety as far as the colors are concerned. It's more of a bright pack than anything else. So you've got a black, a gray, sort of a fuchsia-y pink, purple, pink, yellow, a couple of different greens, and a couple of different blues in here. So I really like the variety on that. If I'm missing anything, it may be an orange, but I don't use orange a whole lot, so that's not going to bother me. You have a color swatch on the back of what each pen is supposed to look like, and this set is $27.99. So these are not really cheap pens by any stretch of the imagination. So what you're going to want to do is, if you are on a budget, go in and use your 40% off coupon. Wait for I know on a lot of Sundays, Michael's tends to have these 65% off coupon days. So get in there with your coupon and buy this kind of set. I was most excited, I think, about this particular set because this is the set that I thought I would use the most. This is going to be sort of reminiscent of a Fudenosuke nib or the Pentel Feud Touch sign pen nibs that I just love. I use the Tombow Fudenosuke's all the time in my titles and in my lettering. So give you a bit of a comparison here. This is the soft tip. So here you go. You've got the Pentel here in pink, the Tombow Fudenosuke, and then the Kelly Creates right here. So you're going to get a similar nib with these pens. And I was really excited when I saw the variety of color in this set also, because I have the, is it a 12 pack, I believe, of the sign pens, and it has got some really nice colors in it, but they are more primary than anything else. So you've got your silver and gold, you've got a blue, a green, or a couple of blues, a green, an orange, a red. The really bold, really primary colors for the most part in this set, which has been great. And I really like the fact that it has all those colors, but I was really excited to see that the Kelly Create set is a little bit more fun in their color choices. I mean, you get the black. I'm not overly convinced that I'm super in love with the gray yet, because it doesn't seem quite as pigmented. It almost seems a little bit transparent down on the page. So I'm not 100% sure that I love the gray yet, but I'm thinking that it might actually be really great for shadowing and things like that because of the way it reacted on the paper. I'm just not 100% in love with this color. I think a little bit darker or a little bit lighter, either way, I would have been slightly happier with, but I mean, it's still a great pen. So these are the colors that you're going to get in here, and this is the pen test on the Scribbles That Matter paper. So the colors are really fun and vibrant, and the yellow is super vibrant. I mean, it's just going to pop right off the page. Kind of got a lime green thing happening here. Some pinks, purple, a nice variation in the blues, a good green. I mean, they're really nice. And these pens are also really, really juicy, wet pens. This is finally dry. So to show you, I'm going to write test again here with this pink. Since I do have a pink in the sign pens, I will be able to do kind of a direct comparison. So you're going to get a nice variation in the line weights again, really thin, and that's about as thick as this is going to go. But it lays color down really evenly. It's very pigmented as well. This is the Pintail Pink. So you can see the line weight is very, very comparable to the Pintail. And this is just a little bit more subtle. The colors in the Pintails are bold and in your face, and these are a little bit juicier, which is okay to a certain extent. I appreciate a nice wet pen, especially when I want nice even color, but they tend to bleed through a lot of paper, especially when you're crossing a T or going back over a previous line. That has been a bit of an issue for me in previous journals when I've used the Pintails. So I do want to make note of that. These colors are just a little bit more subtle, a little more laid back than the bold pop in your face colors that Pintail does. Just as another comparison, let's do, this is the lime green. And this is the darker green. And then this is going to be and I don't know if you can pick up just how wet the Pintails are, but it took a second for that to sink into the paper. So even if you have both sets, none of these colors are actually going to match up, and that's going to give you a large variety in what you have. So right here, I have 3 different greens, which is great. So still super pigmented, but slightly different in the range of colors. All right, so here we have the test. The dark blue was the wettest of all of the pens in this set. It is the only one that really gave me any issue, and this is where I was talking about I've had issue before with the Pintails bleeding through the paper. This is the Scribbles That Matter paper, and you can see in certain little spots the dark blue wanted to bleed through a little bit. Now, once I wrote over this, it would not bother me too much unless it got any worse than this. I mean, this is a little bit much for me, but that's just personal taste and personal preference. The rest of them did fine. I just know that I would need to pull back a little bit and not be so heavy-handed with putting the ink down with this blue pen. Now I know this is why we do pen tests, that this blue one is super, super wet. But that is the Scribbles That Matter paper and the test on it. So very little ghosting on it, and this one was the only one that tried to bleed. Okay, here we have the Leuchtturm, the pen test on it, how the colors react on this creamy paper. You're going to get a little bit more ghosting with this. You see the dark blue again is the only one that really, well, almost the only one that bled through here. The pink was really juicy as well, so it ran into a couple of issues when I colored in a little square. So that is the reaction on the Leuchtturm paper. Got the Rhodia paper here and the pen test for it. Minimal ghosting. This is still not something that would bother me on the Rhodia paper. And not even the blue bled through here. The Rhodia paper is really good about not letting ink bleed through, though. That is the strength of the Rhodia paper. While it will ghost, it is a lot harder to get inks to bleed through on this. So that is something to keep in mind. All right, and then we have the Recollections paper here. and this is the result of it. And I was actually really surprised that it held up as well as it did. So for being really saturated pens, I mean, this paper really held up a lot better than I thought it would. I expected a lot more bleed through, but again, it's mostly the blue and the pink here. I mean, you're going to get a lot of ghosting with this because they put down so much ink, but it's not as bad as I thought it was. All right, moving on to the third set. This is the Dream Pens collection. It's a 10-piece. This is the dual-ended pen, and it's going to have the large brush tip on one end and the small brush tip on the other end. This retails for $29.99. Again, go in and use your coupon and get this at a discount. It's got a nice color range. Again, this one does have an orange in it. The colors are a little more playful than they are primary, which I really like. This is something that I enjoy, so I really like the colors in this as well. So let's move into how they perform. I'm going to show you the tips. This is going to be your large tip end, which is sort of reminiscent of a Tombow type thing, but a little bit smaller. Let me pull out a Tombow over here. So the pen is about half the size of a Tombow, but the actual tip itself is pretty reminiscent of how a Tombow acts. This is going to be your other side, which has got a really nice fine brush tip on it, which I really enjoy, which sort of reminds me of like a slightly smaller Faber-Castell. I mean, and really slightly smaller. I mean, it's got a really pointy end on it, and it's just a little bit smaller than my Faber-Castell is. So I really like the variation in widths on both ends. It's really nice. So moving on to the actual pen test on all of them. So let me show you an example of both. This is going to be the large here. Again, super saturated, very pigmented. There's not any real, now just to give you a comparison, but like I said, this is about half the size of a Tombow brush nib. So that's me pushing down pretty hard on a Tombow. And that's going to be the difference in line weight there. I gotta say, again, I am extremely impressed with the amount of color that this lays down, how even the color is, and the actual thickness that you can get from it. So that is going to be the difference in thickness between a Tombow and what this Color Creates pen will do. Even on the smaller brush nib, you can really, it's got a little bit more flex to it than the larger tip, so you can really do the same thing as far as the thickest line weight with the small tip. It's just a matter of preference as far as which one you would like, but you also don't have to go that thick on your downstrokes with the small pen or with the small end. So it will allow for a little bit smaller lettering, or you can get it just as large as the thicker nib on this one. So you get all kinds of line weight with these pens. But this is going to be on Scribbles That Matter. Barely any ghosting at all. You can barely see that on the other page. No bleed through, which I kind of expected from these, but just to show you. This is the Leuchtturm. Slightly more ghosting, as expected. No bleed. The Rhodia pad. A little bit of ghosting, not too bad. No bleed through. And the Recollections. Again, this paper held up a lot better than I thought it would. It really only had problems when it came to filling in the squares here and on the tips of each letter where I started them. So, just something to be mindful of. That's how the $5 Recollections brand held up. Okay, so the last ones that I am going to show you today are the aqua brushes, and this is more of the colored watercolor brush sort of thing. These are $24.99. They come in a pack of 10. You're going to get about the same colors as with all the other 10 packs. Alright, so these are going to have the bristle brush tip on them. And they're really going to be comparable to something like a Zig Real Brush Clean Color Marker. Although I think the brush is a bit bigger on it. Not too much, but a little bit bigger than you're going to find on the Zig Real Brush Marker. But this is going to be what they're most comparable to, because this is going to have the Real Brush bristle feel also. And I will show you a direct comparison when we get to the Rhodia pad on that. So this isn't something that I personally would use too terribly much as far as calligraphy and hand lettering, because I don't do a lot with aqua brushes. The only thing that I didn't really like about this set is going to be this yellow. It's not really a yellow, in my opinion. It's more of a goldenrod, more of an orangey yellow. So while you don't have an orange in this set, this will pretty much take the place. So if you can see the orange here and the difference in how super bright the yellow has been in the previous ones and how bright the yellow was here, this is going to be the difference right here with how this yellow is going to react. So be aware of that. I mean, there's a big difference. I would really go as far to say that this is more of just a light orange than it would be a yellow. So that was the only difference here. Otherwise, they're really great. Like I said, I don't use them for calligraphy a lot, but you can. So I did that test up here with writing out the word test, and then I did some up and down strokes, a little bit of a scribble, filled in the thing, and did the downstrokes here, upstrokes here for this pen test. And this paper held up to it just fine. So for those of you who actually watercolor, that's a good tip. No ghosting really at all. You can barely see through that. And definitely no bleed through. That's the Scribbles That Matter. Moving on to the Leuchtturm. Same thing. Colors still react pretty well on this paper. I mean, you're going to get a slight variation only because this is a slightly creamier paper, whereas the Scribbles That Matter is more of an ivory. But I do have a comparison of these two on my channel already, so if you want to check that out and the difference between the Leuchtturm and the Scribbles That Matter, that will be in the description box below. But again, still no bleed through. You're going to have a little bit more ghosting. Nothing that would bother me. Alright. This is the Rhodia paper. Ghosting, but again, it's going to soak up the ink and really prevent much of anything from bleeding through this. It's going to take an alcohol marker for the rhodia paper to bleed through. But let me give you the comparison here real quick while we're on this page. I mean, for those of you who are curious, this is about as thick a stroke as you're going to get from this marker. There's a thin line, so really pigmented as well. Really even laying down color. It's not gloopy or anything. So these are really nice pens also, or brushes. This is the Kuretake Zig Clean Color Real Brush Marker. And you can really see it spread apart. That's going to be your thickest line weight on it. Thin. So really comparable as far as the two pens. This spreads out pretty well also. It doesn't spread out exactly the same as the Zig, but you can tell that it is a bristle brush. So this is supposed to fan out, whereas a regular brush pen nib is not supposed to. So don't freak out if you're not aware of that and you see the pen really spread out. You didn't break your pen, you didn't mess up the brush. These are intended to be that way, to give you a more painterly, more brush strokey feel. And see, still barely anything. You're not going to get a lot of bleed on this, but that's how the back of that looks. And finally, the Recollections Journal. The paper here soaks up the color a lot quicker, a lot more, because it's a different type of paper. But overall, again, I've really been impressed with how well this Recollections Journal for $5 is standing up to a lot of the pens that I use often. I mean, really, there are only a couple of spots here where it actually bled through. In most of the cases here, it really didn't. Now you're going to get a decent amount of ghosting because the paper is thinner. It is cheaper, but still, for $5, it's not bad at all. So it is this Recollections Journal, and I am putting it through its paces, is really standing up. So I mean, if you have a more minimal approach to journaling and you don't really use all of these pens, I mean, this would work out really nice for most people. It is not a bad journal at all. But that is the 4 sets that I picked up. I believe there was a space for one other set, and I believe it was just a black pen set in the small brush set. So I think that because a lot of people letter in black rather than color, that's what that was for. But again, I'm not 100% sure. I do know that that set was $6.99, so you probably get 2 or 3 brushes or brush pens in it. Hopefully my Michaels will have it soon, because I do use the black pens the most, and so I know I will go through this one really quickly. But all right, y'all, to sum up, I am I'm so very happy with all of these pens. I am not let down in the slightest by any of the pens in this set. I mean, there are a couple of things, like I said, that you need to make note of. Uh, the transfer on the metallics onto the next page is something to possibly watch, but is not too big of a deal. My paper and the Leuchtturm paper held up really well to all 4 sets. The colors are just vibrant and saturated and lovely on all of the sets, really. The yellow that you get in the aqua brush is a little bit more orangey than it is yellow, but otherwise, I mean, it's still a gray color. It's just not the yellow that I was expecting, given the brightness of the yellow here in the small brush pen and the brightness of the yellow over in the Dream pen. So it just caught me a little off guard, but it's not a bad color. It is just something that you might want to note if you're expecting a super vivid yellow like you got in the other 2 sets. So again, like I said, if you're a little leery about paying this much for the pens, get in there and use your Michaels coupons on these. Look for your 60% off days instead of the 40% off days. I'm really happy that my Michaels finally got them. I am in love with them. I am obsessed with them now, and I am going to be using them more in my journal and with my lettering. So I could not be happier with this purchase. I was not let down at all. So thank you very much to Michaels, Kelly Creates, and American Crafts for putting out this set that is different than all of the other sets that I have. And trust me, I have a lot of pens. So this one is going to be a super duper 2 thumbs up from me. Definitely, definitely worth the money. All right, y'all. Until next time, happy journaling, happy pen testing, and I will see you later. Bye.